Hello, and welcome to the fourth Marine Traffic webinar, run in collaboration with Posidonia Events. I'm Bill Lyons from Navigate PR, and I'm going to be your moderator over the next hour or so. Apologies for the late start. I'm afraid there's a bit of internet connection issues in North today, but if I disappear from the screen, hopefully the more important people, our presenters will still be there. But today we're discussing how the shipping industry can reduce its emissions by improving what happens when a ship actually calls at port. In particular, we're going to focus on how just-in-time ship arrivals can reduce the amount of fuel which is burnt. We all know fuel it is, but why do so many ships speed to their next destination only to spend hours or even days at anchorage waiting for a berth? I'm pleased to say that the IMO, together with an industry task force called the Global Industry Alliance, is examining EVSAS. Already produced a guide which you can download from the file section of your screen. This alliance, so we're going to discuss what's been achieved and the steps which are still needed. From the IMO, we have Astrid Dispert, who has helped set up the global, involved with the Green Voyage 2050 project, which run in collaboration with the Norwegian government, designed to promote the uptake of green technology right across the maritime sector. Agiris Stasinakis is an executive partner at MarineTraffic and one of the company's founders. He's based in Oxford in the UK, and he's part of the team that's involved with lots of collaborative projects with ports and shipping companies, software companies, charter. Ben van Scherpenzeel, Development's Policy and Plans. He's also the chair of the International Task Force on Port Call Optimization. He's someone who actually understands the ship crew under himself, having served a deck officer on tankers and cruise liners, I think. Andreas van der Werf, a port optimization manager with Maersk, and he's also a member of the International Task Force called Optimization. He's based in the Netherlands as well, and he'll be bringing us the perspective of someone who's run vessel operations as well as served as a master on container vessels. Before I ask Astrid to give us an overview of the Alliance's mandate and the work that's happening at the moment, and the audience that you can ask questions, so just tap them into the chat function on the right of the screen. I can't promise we'll be able to do our best at the end of the presentations. Astrid, can I hand over to you?
Yes, thanks a lot, Bill, and thank you very much to MarineTraffic, to Navigate PR and Posidonia Events for inviting the Global Industry Alliance to this exciting webinar. What I want to do is just give a little bit of a background of what's going on at IMO, and I'm sure you are very aware of the initial greenhouse gas strategy that we adopted in 2018, and it has, of course, been a quite momentous occasion for us as the IMO, as we have been long discussing the need to create a reduction goal for shipping, and so it was recognized that the strategy was urgently needed. And this strategy really sends a very clear signal to the shipping sectors and to all stakeholders that the industry will change and will not remain the same. As you can see, the strategy includes a very ambitious vision. It says IMO remains committed to reducing greenhouse gas emissions from international shipping, and as a matter of urgency aims to phase them out as soon as possible in the century. So the vision creates a very clear timeline, a framework, and really makes clear the direction that we are traveling towards. What the strategy also emphasized quite a bit, if you look into more detail, is that there is a real need to increase uptake of existing technical and operational energy efficiency measures, so how we design and how we operate ships. It also highlights really that innovation is key, but also makes clear that to be able to decarbonize shipping and reduce emissions, we will require collaboration and cooperation, and that ultimately actors will need to really play a role in delivering this, and the changes must come from collaborations. And we want to present here some work today that we have been doing under the Global Industry Alliance to support low carbon shipping. There's been a lot of extra work being done in other groups, for example, in Ben's task force on port call optimization. But what we want to share here mainly today is what we've been doing under what we call the GIA, which is a partnership of the IMO and 14 companies. And as you can see, we have a quite nice mix of ship owners, classification societies, and technology developers, data providers, and port as well, to really look, and this group really looks into existing barriers to decarbonizing shipping, and really try to find innovative solutions of how to reduce and decarbonize shipping. And oops, okay, sorry. What we want to show you is at the very first meeting of the GIA, which has been 3 years ago, how this all really started is that ship owners came on the table and really said, we are looking for very innovative technologies to reduce emissions and a lot of R&D. But what is really not really functioning today is just the issue of how a ship calls a port. And the ship owners around the table were complaining about their ships waiting, days to weeks, or hours, days to weeks at anchorage before even being able to call a port, because of not availability of the berths and of services that are required. So this is how we got into this. And before we explain in more detail the barriers that we've been analyzing as a group that contains obviously shipping, ports, and other relevant stakeholders, we want to show you very briefly a small video that just brings us all to the same level of understanding of what we mean by just in time, which is the concept we want to show, and then we
maritime
will go
shipping
into more
emits
detail
around
of
1
the
billion
barriers
tons of
just in time.
CO2 each year. Just-in-time sailing could be part of the solution to significantly reduce this. Eliminating unnecessary early arrivals at the port would enable ships to sail slower and consume less fuel. There are a number of reasons why this is hard to achieve, including contractual issues. But not knowing when the previous ship will leave is a major obstacle. The ship currently at berth will only depart after loading, unloading, bunkering, provisioning, and other critical services are completed. However, currently the terminal and other service providers share very few updates about completion times. Because of this uncertainty, the departing ship cannot inform the Port Authority of its departure time until these services are near completion. A Port Authority's decision to grant the ship permission to depart is based on traffic and the availability of nautical services. This may cause additional last-minute changes to the ship's final departure time. The incoming ship needs to know in advance when its berth and the services become available. However, it nowadays receives this information only about 2 hours before arrival, when the ship is in radio range. Sharing updates earlier and more frequently would allow an incoming ship to adjust its sailing speed much earlier and sail a lot more efficiently. Even a modest speed reduction of 10% can result in a 30% reduction of CO2 emissions. Just-in-time sailing is the smart thing to do. It is the sustainable thing to do. The sooner we start, the better.
Sorry, I don't quite know what happened to the video there. I really wanted to bring the audience here at this point, and I've got to set up a little poll for everybody. So a poll's going to appear on your screen. What we'd like to know is what percent of time, what percentage of its time a year do you think that a tanker spends at anchorage? Is it less than 1%? Is it less than 10%? So I'm going to pop up a poll on the right of your screen. So let's hope the technology works. And I'll just ask you just to very quickly click on those. So hopefully I'll start seeing some responses coming in. Great, we're seeing some things coming through, so just bear us for 2 minutes. So it looks like the audience thinks that most of you think that less than 10% of its time is spent at anchorage. About a quarter of you think that less than 5% of the time is spent at anchorage. So Agiris at MarineTraffic, what do you make of these results?
Bill, yeah, it's actually quite exciting to see that the audience is very right. In the scheme of the Global Industry Alliance and the work we've been doing under the IMO, we set up in measuring the time that vessels spent at anchorage, and this is work that we did using the MarineTraffic AIS data. Perhaps you know already that we geofence all ports and all anchorages in the world, and what this study is about. This is about vessels who have spent time at anchorage prior to a subsequent port call. So it does not count time spent at anchorage not related to a port call. And what we see here is that in the wet bulk trade in particular, tankers will tend to stay as much as 9% of their time during the period of a whole calendar year waiting at anchorage in order to enter port, which is very much in line with the results of our poll. So I think the audience here is well educated and has, if not knowing that in advance, has a great instinct. And herein lies, essentially the essence of the problem. How can we avoid, for a vessel spending almost 30 days of its life cycle every year, just waiting there to enter port to do cargo operations? And it's a significant question, and it's really at the heart of optimizing the journey of the vessel. What we also see on this chart is that other trades, and particularly here container ships being the largest fleet, especially when compared with LNG carriers. So container ships, there are about 5,000 vessels. They tend to wait the least in this study, a little bit less than 5%. Given that typically they are, they can coordinate their voyage with terminals better, but that in itself still has room for improvement. And indeed, at Rotterdam, they were, they're making the point that vessels don't just wait at anchorage, but they also drift and conduct maneuvering while waiting to get in. And indeed, the previous study would not have captured such events. So what we measured before, not including maneuvering, is typically an understatement of the real problem in hand. So in a period, in a month period, I beg your pardon, in a weekly period in 2019, about more than a year ago now, we noticed that only 11 vessels anchored outside Rotterdam, while 19 were maneuvering as they were approaching. The good news is that 31 vessels sailed with just in time, i.e. without waiting at all. So there is a significant opportunity for optimizing how we conduct business today. And since we're speaking about Rotterdam, I think it's the right moment for me to invite Ben to continue with the work that they have already conducted in demonstrating all these principles. Ben, if you would like to turn on your camera and microphone, please.
Yes, switched on. Thank you.
Fantastic. And if actually I take you to the next slide, right?
Yes, please. So to get a fact-finding mission, we took a real ship with an average size container ship with an average draft on a normal route from Bremerhaven to Rotterdam, and we executed a common procedure trip It covers 247 nautical miles. And we simulated a typical voyage where the ship is informed about the availability of the pilot, the fairway, the tugs, the berth, etc. at the first calling in point, where VTS is normally contacting the vessel, which is typically about 1.5 hours to 2 hours sailing away from the pilot boarding place. And we simulated a scenario where the ship is already advised by different means of communication, like satellite, 8 hours before arrival. And that already resulted for, again, an average ship with not sailing the maximum speed, just a normal speed, to 23% savings. When the ship is sailing at higher speeds, of course, the savings are significantly higher. Next slide, please. So if it is that obvious that just-in-time makes common sense, why is it not happening? Well, there are multiple reasons. One is that we are facing contractual barriers and operational barriers. Contractual barriers we see often in the dry bulk and in the tanker sector, where most ships are under a voiced charter party. That means that the captain has to respect a minimum charter speed, and he cannot deviate from that speed without breaching a contract. So that is contractual. So if the master is advised that the pilot boarding place will only be available 2 days from now, then still he has to keep up the speed and drop anchor after arrival. The operational barriers are more related to the fact that for both bulk, tanker and container sector, we are dealing with a lot of stakeholders who are all dictating together the reliable departure time of the vessel, which of course leads to a just-in-time arrival of the next ship. Today, it is not common practice to have one-to-many sharing of data when completion times are expected. And today, we do not have yet a global respected standard for every port to share this data. So again, we are aware that these barriers need to be tackled. But the good news is that we have a very close collaboration now between ports, terminals, and shipping to agree at least on a common business process and which barriers in the business process we have to tackle together. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd like to invite Andreas sharing issues. You need to switch your audio on, please, Andreas.
It's still off. If audio doesn't work, Andreas, maybe there's a reconnect button or not for us. Bill, what do you suggest?
Okay, I'm going to just reconnect everybody. So you'll see your screen go blank for 5 seconds, and we're going to reboot it, and we'll be back in the system. So just hold on a moment, please, everyone.
Okay.
Can you hear me now?
Loud and clear.
Perfect.
Let us just share the slides there. If you have them. We're just waiting for Bill to share the slides in order to resume. And we've got connectivity problems with Bill.
But the slides are on.
The slides are on, so let's see where we are. Okay,
I can
go for it.
I can just forward to the slides. No problem. And there we go again. Okay, good day, everybody. I'm Andreas. I work with Maersk in the domain of port call optimization, and I will take you through some slides on the challenges that we see from a perspective of. Let's see that we are going to the correct slides again. Good, now we are there. Well, in today's world, we see that there's the ocean lag in the end-to-end supply chain is virtually invisible for our beneficial cargo owners or cargo owners as such. And the largest complaints in the container segment of the beneficial cargo owners are the reliability of the transport. Are we in time? Do we stick to our promises when the cargo will be delivered? The proprietary transparency models, how does a container carrier relay his information, and dealing with the vast array of different approaches in this sense. What they would like to see, the beneficial cargo owners, is that the real-time visibility on where their cargo is and ETA visibility in order to improve their warehouse planning and delivery of cargo to their destinations. This also implies that we need standardization of master and event data. This is which is maintained by a robust standardization organization to ensure the quality of this data and the interoperability of these systems. And this is the only sustainable way forward in together with our beneficial cargo owners or other cargo owners. And we have to realize that ocean transport is only one node in the end-to-end supply chain, and visibility in the ocean segment is lacking. And it is also required to drive for sustainable and efficient planning of the hinterland services. What we see in the port is to arrive for ship in the port is basically not generally a big issue. The question, however, is will the ship fit? And there we can see from a legal or contractual perspective: is the port safe? Is the captain allowed to arrive? Can he do it? Does the master have the necessary information or port master data in order to berth his or her ship safely and in compliance with all legislation? From an operational perspective, we need to know if the master has all the information from an operational perspective available. Is it in compliance with all legislation? Are the services that he requires guaranteed? And once the vessel has arrived in port, the ocean nodes have to connect to the seamlessly to the next mode of transport or modality, which can be barge, truck, rail. And it is very important that we have a connection with the hinterland in order to have a sustainable supply chain in totally. Transparent knowledge of port restrictions is also paramount. And we need to know what are the wind and tidal restrictions of a port? What is the maintained depth? What is the dredging regime? What and how many water do I have available for my ship? And this data quality for a port call is absolutely paramount to optimize the port call. If I arrive with a vessel in a pilot boarding area and I cannot approach the port because the water depth is not sufficient, we are already sub-optimizing the whole process of the ocean leg. Realizing a safe and sustainable berth-to-berth navigation can only be achieved by answering the following easy questions. Does my ship fit? Where is my berth? Believe it or not, a lot of situations you as a master don't even know where your berth is. When is my berth available? And that also means the berth available are the nautical services like pilots, tugs and linesmen available in order to arrive at berth. And can I proceed to the berth safely? Do I have a safe port passage? Don't I encounter a deep drafted vessel? If this information is not available, we are sub-optimizing a port call. And being able to answer these questions is the first step in port optimization through data sharing. However, the data sharing requires collaboration with all the actors in the port industry. To ensure that we have an industry-wide acceptation and adoption of standards, we need to have standardized master and event data in order to connect machine to machine and human to human. In the maritime domain, these standards are maintained by the IHO, the International Hydrographic Organization. They ensure the data quality for safe berth-to-berth passage. To connect to the end-to-end supply chain, data is maintained through, for instance, GS1 by the ISO, International Standards Organization. Work is in progress to further ensure robust data, event data and master data standards that will be adapted by the industry. Event data standards for notifications and declarations are suggested to the IMO Fall to be included in the IMO Fall compendium. What we have further done in the GIA is to provide and publish a widely accepted just-in-time arrival guide, which will assist everybody who is interested in just-in-time arrival to look at the measures that we have taken, the suggestions that we have done in order to facilitate just-in-time arrival in ports. Let's see if the next one is also for me. No, and that was it from my side.
Okay, thank you, Andreas. And to go back to ask us the next steps. So Astrid, if I could ask to hand over to you, please.
Thanks a lot, Bill, and I hope this gave you a little bit of an overview of what we have been doing, you know, in the GIA, really trying to see how can we help the sector move from essentially being in a hurry up and wait situations where ships go at a far too high speed or sail with a higher speed than needed into, you know, the port area to figure out that basically berths and services are not available, and then having to wait or maneuver. And as you have seen, we have taken a little bit of effort to look into the potential, you know, the impact on emissions of these waiting time and maneuvering. And obviously what we want is help the sector now move to just-in-time arrivals, whereby the ship receives information and data in a more frequent manner, in a standardized manner, to be able to allow and optimize the speed on the voyage to arrive into the port just in time when berths and fairway and other services are available. So this is what we have been trying to do, and As my colleagues have also mentioned, this obviously requires very wide collaboration between shipping, between port authorities, between terminals that also play a key role here, and other service providers in the ports. And we have put a lot of effort into this guide. So I would really encourage you to if you are interested, to download the guide and have a look. It really breaks down all the contractual barriers that Ben was mentioning, and the operational barriers that Ben and Andreas were mentioning, that obviously, a lot relate to data exchange, data quality, availability, the ease of exchange of data. And yeah, it really breaks it down nicely in that guide. We will be publishing it officially in the next few weeks. It has been submitted to IMO member states for their consideration, but it will be also soon be a public publication. We also in that guide suggest a way forward. We are obviously as a group very keen to deliver tangible results. It's a very practical group and very hands-on experts experience that is in the industry alliance. So we are really working towards a big pilot of just in time. And we are in that guide also making a suggestion of the way forward in terms of prioritizing on the container sector first, because as Ben said, there are no contractual barriers on the container side, while also supporting for tankers and bulkers, overcoming barriers related to contracts and charter parties that we have identified. Before finishing off, I also want to highlight that obviously from the IMO perspective, you may be aware we have adopted last year a resolution that calls for stronger collaboration between shipping, ports and terminals to work on reduction of emissions. And I think, that's really the increased understanding, or, that we need collaboration, by everyone, and all stakeholders need to be involved to reduce emissions. So the GIA is also broadening its work now to not only work on in the port ship interface on just in time, but have a look into other measures in the ship port interface that could reduce emissions. So hopefully more and more work that we can show you soon. Yes, Bill, I think that's from my side in terms of a summary where we are. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Astrid. And if I could invite the rest of the panel to pop on their cameras and their audio, and we can take some questions. So if I could also ask from the audience as well, we lost some of the notes, so do bear with us. I suppose really the first question I wanted to ask, this data that's being exchanged between the terminal and the ship and the various service providers, what industry's got the whole issue of data ownership? Is this still something which there's a lot of conflict about, a lot of discussion still going on? I wonder, perhaps Agiris, you might be able to shed some light on this.
Well, data ownership is at the heart of a lot of that, and indeed, actually, I'm very happy to have colleagues here from the port and the liners talk about that even more than I. In any case, any application handling data will need to take care of properly managing who the data is available to, what are the business rules for sharing the data, and ultimately winning, if you like, the trust of stakeholders contributing data. Because it's easy to say, let's set up some sort of port data hub and share the information. At the same time, some of that information is considered to be critical, mission critical for some. For some, it relates to the cargo and when the cargo would be available on the market. So people choose to be very mindful on who they would be sharing such kind of information. So on this basis, there is, I consider that to be a little bit of a barrier. Maybe what I could say here before I hand on to my colleagues is that we at MarineTraffic, we are from the AIS side, and as you know, AIS data is essentially open in terms of origin, as it is captured as emitted from the ships. And the work that we do relates to turning the basic AIS information into the timeline of a ship. And indeed, we capture all sorts of events in relation to ships entering ports, going into berth, leaving, etc. So therein lies loads of statistics, loads of information which can be used for forecasting purposes. So together with the official data set, which we would like to see exchanged, we also have the result of processing open data sets, which can offer all sorts of insights. So there's an interesting combination there of what we can do with both data sets in order to cross-validate each other and offer additional value. But I would be interested to hear there Ben talk about it and Andreas.
Yeah, it's correct, Agiris, that some data elements might be commercially sensitive, and therefore, people are hesitant to share the data. So when I'm, for example, a terminal, and I only offer services to one customer, then my berth planning, for example, is not commercially sensitive. However, if I'm a terminal operator and I serve multiple customers, then my berth planning might become commercially sensitive because my berthing schedule is maybe in favor of one customer over the other. So then we have to respect that how we share the data should be controlled by the data owner in that respect. Thank you.
Yeah, very interesting. Andreas, please. Andreas, would you like also to contribute?
Can you hear me or not?
Yeah, loud and clear.
Yeah. Okay. So the video is frozen. So you have the silent image of me. Thank you. Yeah, indeed, the data sharing is a huge issue, right? And we see what we have experienced in the time that we have been working in the International Task Force Port Call Optimization, as well as in the GIA, where we also identified that data sharing seems to be an issue. The maritime domain is very conservative, and it takes really a mindset change to see people adapting to the wish to share data in order to improve the whole port optimization realm in that sense. Everybody still believes that I own the data, and if I stick to it, then it will be best for me. But if I, as a container operator, arrive in a port at time X, and then I have to drift or drop anchor in order to let a deep drafted vessel have priority, or when I'm sailing to, for instance, South America, where the cruise industry has preference over cargo vessels, then you have a challenge, and that challenge that translates in that you have burned too much fuel, and then if you translate that again, you have a larger environmental impact. What we see also now is that our customers, our beneficial cargo owners, demand from the container shipping lines that they really do something about their environmental footprint. So from that angle, also there is a huge demand for action, and that also translates again that we need to embrace the whole port community as one entity in order to improve and collaborate with all the actors in the port community to make this a success. in that sense, also, if we fail to make it a success, there will be regulation, and perhaps a European regulation or a global regulation in order to reduce our carbon footprint and to aim and achieve the goals that are set.
Curious if I may join in as well. I mean, I think what we have seen from the desktop exercise that Ben showed that we calculated is that maybe we don't need to enable all data exchange immediately, but stepwise approach. What we have seen from the desktop exercises, if we even are able to provide a requested time of arrival at pilot boarding place to a ship several hours in advance, from an emission perspective, it has a huge impact. And what we have been trying to see is how can we make it happen that ships, would receive the information 12 hours in advance, because even on short distances, short voyages within Europe, that could have a tremendous impact on emission reduction. So maybe not, trying to change everything overnight, but starting step by step on the key data elements that are required. And obviously, being able to transmit the requested time of arrival demands knowing very clearly or clearer on when the ship that is currently at berth will leave the berth. So if we are able to, get better in these both, I think we are already a big step ahead. I don't know if Ben wants to add to that, but I think that is definitely a clear message from the work we have done.
No, I echo what Astrid was saying. So if we limit very to the data set that the captain allows to reduce speed, that would be already a big step forward. And if you only look indeed at the 12-hour notice only versus trying to predict 3-4 days ahead of time, just start with a small step, one small data set, only 12 hours ahead. That already makes a big impact. And then we can grow step by step to the ideal scenario. But indeed, let's keep it simple in the beginning. Absolutely. Thank you.
Yeah, it's an extremely valid point coming back to this pilot study. I remember when we were discussing the marine traffic contribution to the GIA already more than 3 years ago, we were rather excited by the potential for reducing carbon emissions by optimizing the time of arrival of a ship, essentially empowering just in time. And us being a data company, we saw a lot of value in that. And given that the target, the 50% reduction in emissions target by 2050 is on, it seems like here we've got an instrument, a tool, if you like, which can really, partially facilitate this goal. Okay.
Maybe I think also what is important in all this is, we haven't really spoken about this in the presentation, is the fact that data sharing needs to be a win-win for everyone. I think everyone needs to see, and all stakeholders that need to share, because data ownership is very distributed across all players. So every stakeholder has different ownership of different data sets that need to be shared. But I think that what we've been trying to get our head around is how do you incentivize all parties to share information and create a win-win for everyone, which is maybe more obvious for one stakeholder over the other one. We have been thinking quite a lot, about how to incentivize terminal operators to share information, because maybe there it's less obvious what the win is for them. So I think in thinking about increasing sharing of information to allow just in time, the thinking has to be also how do we incentivize all the parties.
Yeah, and as we have seen in our GIA meetings, desktop meetings, and generally the industry input workshops, also on the legal side, if we compare for tankers and containers are not like normally bound by contractual challenges, whereas dry bulk and wet bulk are very much hampered by contractual issues in order to facilitate just-in-time sailing. So that's also something that we need to be very much aware of, and also take it in consideration, and tying in on Astrid's win-win situation, we need to have a solution for that as well. And there are parties like BIMCO and others working very hard on virtual arrival clauses in the contracts in order to also incentivize tanker owners and who are normally also getting earnings from demurrage and detention of the ships by arriving too early, while they are also having a large carbon footprint. That's also something that we are most certainly looking into. Coming from the container industry myself, we don't have that issue that much, but also see other challenges like what is the expected time of departure of the vessel when it is at berth and ready for departure after completion of cargo operations, because we need to realize that a vessel can arrive at the pilot's boarding place at a certain time. That is often not an issue, but if the berth is still occupied, then also these efforts are in vain, and we have a too large carbon footprint.
Thank you, and apologies. I'm your moderator back again, I hope. So apologies for that. But I think, Agiris, you get the conversation going nicely. We have a couple of questions from the audience. Lennart asks, these are addressed to Ben at the Port of Rotterdam. He says, what % of container vessels arriving at them today have 0 time at anchorage?
Well, in the overview, we saw that about 50% does sail just in time. So that's the good news. So, and whether a ship has to wait, yes or no, yeah, that is hard to see from AIS data, because if a ship is at anchor, the ship may have arrived with an optimized speed. However, maybe there was too much slack in the schedule, forcing the ship to wait at anchor to wait for the berth. So the definition of just-in-time arrivals versus optimizing speed, the aim is, of course, to carry cargo with a minimum impact on emissions per carried container. So in that sense, if a ship is optimizing its speed to arrive at the anchorage/port boarding place, that is first aim, of course, and then taking the slack out of the schedule by offering a reliable service as a port together with authorities like customs. Yeah, that would be, of course, the next step to take out the additional margins that we have today to cater for unexpected delays in port. Thank you.
Thanks. Another question from the audience, from Julius, is about the status of EU legislation. GIA can influence the EU Commission. Maybe Astrid might be able to help on that.
So you were a bit broken off, but I think I understood partly what was asked. The GIA is basically a partnership under IMO, a public-private partnership, and we do a lot of, these kind of collaboration efforts and information sharing and gaining a better understanding of these issues. And what we basically do is we provide all this information to IMO member states. So IMO member states are obviously, the ones that draft legislation and regulation. And there's obviously a lot of work now being done to operationalize the initial greenhouse gas strategy. So we provide, information to that forum, and member states, do with this information and take this forward the way, obviously they like it. The European countries are obviously member states of the IMO as well, so they are represented as IMO member states as well. I don't know if I got the question right, but we would, as a GIA, not directly influence on EU, but we provide information to IMO member states, of which obviously EU is also part.
Yeah, Bill, and
Thank you.
Bill, in addition to that, we also had some interaction with the EU in the International Task Force Protocol Optimization, and Ben would be able to expand a little bit on that.
No, whenever there is a question from the maritime departments of the EU to explain the ins and outs of operations and contracts related to shipping, then we are happy to take them to the ins and outs of the business process and all the operational issues that are related to that. So yeah, indeed, we interact with the EU based on, again, content, to give them an insight how, from a hands-on perspective, what issues we are dealing with in operations. Thank you.
Thank you. And a final point, it's really a point raised by one of our audience members, is use of AI can help protect data exchange between a port and a ship. Also opportunities for streaming data between a group of stakeholders on a need-to-know basis. To what extent does the panel think then that artificial intelligence, AI developments, things are fast changing at the moment? To what extent has that been built into your thinking? Perhaps I could address that to Agiris first of all.
Yeah, I mean, one can be innovative on how to use artificial intelligence, machine learning and the like. Typically, this relates to, well, not so much in data management and access rights, but mostly in terms of extracting additional value out of the data, running forecasting. Having said that, I will not dispute that the audience has something there, Reza, I read, in their minds. There has been, I also read about blockchain in the chat going down, and indeed there's been loads of technological solutions that have been proposed, architectures, technologies that have been proposed in order to handle data sharing, and most of them, all of them, are viable. But typically, they need to respect the business case, the business processes, and I think at the moment that's what we're trying to figure out. It's actually, and particularly when opening up data, an organization would need to feel secure that selected people have access to that for a good reason, and that they get something back, an incentive, as Astrid mentioned. And at the moment, this is still hanging in the air. The more we debate it, the closer we will get. By narrowing down the study, as we talked about now, looking into the container sector first, the easier it will be, because the more generic a problem is, the harder it is to find a solution. So we've got some work ahead, discussing more about it, trialing things out. There have been excellent case studies in ports across the world. Makes sense, and hopefully will yield result. I mean, in my mind, there's also the geographical side to it. You do expect territories around the world to be wanting to manage their data differently. I mean, I can think of China, for example, having often its own preferences on handling information in and out of Chinese operations, such as ports, for example. So there's something there interesting. I would love to hear perhaps
Agiris, if maybe I can join in. I mean, I think we are aware that blockchain AI is being used in the maritime sector, but I think what we have seen from our work is that let's try to walk first before we try to run. There seems to be a lot of building blocks that are still not really there, or that we need to get going with. And I was quite surprised when we started this, this whole work of hearing that when you talk about requested time of arrival, for some captains is pilot boarding place, for some it's berth, and the mere definitions of these data elements is not standardized, and it's not used in the same way by all stakeholders. So if we want machines to be able to talk to machines, then we need definitions to be in place, we need standards to be in place, and I think technology is then kind of the next step. So I guess from our work, and I assume you can all agree, we have to work on the building blocks first.
Yeah, and if I may jump in here, then also I would like to refer back to the movie, right? In the current situation, we are technically only able to inform a vessel like 3 hours out of the port, because then the vessel has VHF range. We are also looking into better ways of communicating towards the vessel, right? 12 hours out, which is already a challenge for us at this very moment. There are options, obviously. Are they the most ideal options? Probably not. But we still have to target and pilot these kind of challenges first in order to start piloting and actually achieving just-in-time sailing.
Yeah. Ben, may I invite you to say a last word on that one? I think we're more or less ready to close. If you guys would like to put in a closing statement before we say goodbye to our audience.
Yeah, again, putting in place the first fundamental building blocks to allow a ship physically to arrive just in time and time-wise, that is indeed an important step forward and a call for action for standardization bodies. Thank you.
Andreas, please.
Yeah, and for me, I'm really happy that we had a platform in order to show what we are doing. Thank you for that, Argyris, also for the invite. And I think it's vastly important work that we are doing, and we need to kind of spread the word that that this is an important item, right? It's expected that shipping is decarbonizing, and that's also shown in the IMO resolutions and the 2050 targets. And basically, we are not too early to start with these initiatives, right? We are under a time pressure, and that's something that is also something that I'm pleased that we finally have industry groups, alliances that tackle the problem, and that we can mutually come to to solutions, and at least don't sit and wait for the train to hit us, but actually proactively do something about the challenges that we are facing in the coming years.
Thank you, Andreas. Astrid?
Yes, thanks a lot, Argyris, and thank you to the organizers for giving us the opportunity to present this work of the GIA. I think my comments are, pretty much down the line from Andreas. From the IMO perspective, we have adopted a very ambitious strategy, greenhouse gas strategy, with very strong targets that need to be achieved. And we know they can only be achieved through collaboration and increased efforts by all the stakeholders, and by shipping, ports and terminals working together. So it would be a plea for increased collaboration with all these stakeholders. But thanks a lot from the IMO side for giving us this platform to showcase this work. And we are always open to sharing information and collaborating. So if you have any further questions, please feel free to get in touch with any of us. Thanks a lot.
Well, fantastic. Thanks, all three of you. On behalf of then Posidonia Events and MarineTraffic, we thank you for coming in. It was really a pleasure to host you and actually sit alongside with you as we do in our working sessions. I hope the audience has found it useful. So that's the end for today, and it's actually the fourth and last of these sessions being coordinated by Posidonia and MarineTraffic and Navigate PR. So thanks very much to everybody for listening in. Take care and reach out for whatever you need. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thanks a lot. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.